Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something really vital for anyone looking to grow, professionally or person.
Right,
How we manage ourselves,
right.
especially when things, well, start going right.
That's the tricky part sometimes.
Exactly. We're going to zero in on
Yeah.
the sneaky dangers of ego, maybe,
Yeah.
and why keeping it in check is just so crucial for sustained success.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some really, really insightful material to dig into here. Excerpts that use history to shine a light on these challenges that are, well, they're timeless, really. What's great is that it's not just theory. It's rooted in real examples, which gives us practical lessons, stuff you can actually use, wherever you are on your path.
So our mission for this deep dive is
Yeah.
pretty straightforward then.
Uh-huh.
Understand why managing yourself, your qualities, your ambitions, all that, why it's so critical for the long haul.
Right. And not just getting stuck on me, me, me.
Yes, that focus beyond yourself.
Yeah.
How essential that is for avoiding those common pitfalls. We'll look at some fascinating contrasts too. Eisenhower and his order,
Versus DeLorean's chaos. Big
Right.
contrast there.
and then the really inspiring case of General Marshall, selflessness. So yeah, get ready to maybe rethink how you approach your own growth.
Let's dive right in. There's this quote from La Rochefoucauld that kind of sets the stage perfectly.
Okay.
It is not enough to have great qualities. We should also have the management of them. What does that bring up for you?
It hits me straight away that, raw talent, ambition, that's just the starting point, isn't it?
Right.
You can have all the potential, but if you can't channel it, can't organize things, those qualities might not actually take you anywhere useful, like a powerful engine with no steering wheel.
Exactly like that. A perfect analogy. And our first look at managing great qualities brings us to Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Okay.
Yeah. There's this story from his very first day as president. The chief usher hands him 2 sealed envelopes marked confidential and secret.
Okay, sounds important.
You'd think. But Eisenhower's reaction was immediate and quite firm. He said, "Never bring me a sealed envelope. That's what I have a staff for."
Huh. My first reaction is, wow, was he just offloading work? But given our topic,
Yeah,
it sounds more like it was about the system, right?
you got it.
Like those sealed envelopes signaled a bottleneck, a lack of process.
Spot on.
Yeah.
He saw it as a sign of disorganization. If crucial information was bypassing the proper channels and landing directly on his desk, something was broken in the system.
So his first priority wasn't policy details. It was structure.
Exactly. For Eisenhower, job 1 was organizing the executive branch into, like, a well-oiled machine. This wasn't new for him. It came straight from his military leadership style.
Make sense?
It wasn't about dodging work. It was about clarity. Clear roles, clear responsibilities, and crucially, trusting his people to do their jobs.
Trust and empowerment.
Yes. His chief of staff famously said, and this is gold for anyone leading anything, "The president does the most important things. I do the next most important things."
Wow, that's powerful. It really speaks to delegation and focus.
Doesn't it? It kind of reframes that image many have of Eisenhower, the grandfatherly figure, maybe playing golf.
Right, like he was relaxed because he was organized, not instead of being organized.
Precisely. That leisure time wasn't him slacking off. It was the result of the efficient system he'd built. He clearly understood that difference between urgent tasks and genuinely important ones.
The tyranny of the urgent versus the truly strategic.
You nailed it. And this is a key insight for our listeners as they climb their own ladder, so to speak. The skills that got you here, they might not be the skills that keep you succeeding at the next level.
That's a sobering thought.
Well, the material puts it pretty bluntly. When we're aspiring or small time, we can be idiosyncratic. We can compensate for disorganization with hard work and a little luck.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
It's not going to cut it in the majors. In fact, it'll sink you if you can't grow up and organize. What resonates there for you?
Well, it hits home, definitely. Early on, you could often power through with sheer effort, right? Even if things are a bit messy. But as complexity grows in your career, your projects, whatever, you just can't do it all yourself. You need systems. You need to delegate well. You have to keep your eye on the big picture.
Tries.
You just get completely bogged down in the weeds, lost.
Exactly. So Eisenhower provides one model, effective self-management leading to organizational strength.
Okay.
Now, for a really stark contrast, let's talk about John DeLorean.
The DeLorean. The car, the story.
The whole saga.
Yeah.
He left a big job at GM, had this bold vision for a futuristic car company, Lots of buzz, lots of excitement initially.
Yeah, even now, decades later, there's still this lingering image, isn't there? Maybe he was just a misunderstood visionary.
Well, the sources we're looking at paint a very different picture. They call it a cautionary tale. A power-hungry narcissist undermines his own vision and loses millions of dollars of other people's money in the process.
Oof. Strong words.
Yeah.
So what was the core problem? It wasn't just bad luck.
Fundamentally, according to this analysis, DeLorean believed that GM's culture of order and discipline, the very thing Eisenhower valued, was stifling, especially his creativity.
Okay, so he wanted to break free.
Right. When he started his own company, he deliberately rejected those structures. He aimed for what he called a freewheeling creative sanctuary.
And the reality.
The reality was messy. Political infighting, total dysfunction, corruption. It led straight to financial ruin and even criminality.
So it wasn't too much creativity, it was too little.
Yeah.
Management.
Pretty much. The text contrasts his constant busyness with Eisenhower's strategic approach. Just being active doesn't mean you're being effective.
Right. There's a quote from an executive, isn't there?
Yes, saying DeLorean had the ability to recognize a good opportunity, but he didn't know how to make it happen.
Wow. And another described his style as chasing colored balloons.
Yeah, constantly distracted, no real focus, which tells you a lot about his self-management, or rather the lack of it.
It sounds like ego was driving the bus.
It seems that way. Disregarding basic organization, discipline, strategy, he'd micromanage trivial things but neglect the critical stuff.
Struggled with delegation too.
Big time. Except maybe to a small inner circle where loyalty seemed more important than actual competence. Plus, he was known for being late, unprepared, just scattered.
And that kind of leadership, or lack thereof, must have created a chaotic company culture.
It absolutely did. It mirrored his own disorganization. The text mentions executives pursuing side hustles that benefited DeLorean personally on company time.
Unbelievable.
And his tendency to, let's say, bend the truth, that seemed to infect the whole place. The summary is pretty damning. Like, many people driven by a demon, DeLorean's decisions were motivated by everything but what would have been efficient, manageable, or responsible.
Instead of fixing GM's system, he just threw out order entirely.
Exactly. What ensued was chaos in which no one followed the rules, no one was accountable, and very little got done.
And the consequences for the actual company, the cars.
Devastating. Terrible cars, way over budget, dealer problems, a failed launch. The DeLorean Motor Company just collapsed spectacularly.
A clear line, then, from his inability to manage himself to the failure of the whole dream.
A very clear, very direct line.
It makes you think about that pattern,
Yeah.
when someone finally gets into power after being frustrated by the old way.
The temptation to just burn it all down.
Yeah. To overcorrect. The text touches on this, becoming the man. Yes, in the end, we all face becoming the adult supervision we originally rebelled against. Yet often we react petulantly and prefer to think, now that I'm in charge, things are going to be different. What's the risk there?
The risk is huge. You might throw out valuable principles along with the bad practices. Eisenhower showed that leadership isn't about chucking out all structure or just indulging your whims.
Even with immense power, he chose order, responsibility.
Exactly. DeLorean's story is just such a powerful reminder. Vision, talent, they aren't enough on their own. Execution, management, starting with yourself, that's critical.
And as you move up, your role changes,
Yeah.
right? From doing the work.
To making decisions, leading others. It requires a different mindset. Maybe some humility. Recognizing others might be better at certain things.
Yeah, definitely. But there's that temptation, isn't there? To
Yeah.
get stuck in the small stuff, putting out fires just to feel busy or important.
Playing boss man instead of focusing on the big picture.
Right. And if you're doing that, who's actually steering the ship?
Nobody, effectively. So what's a key takeaway here for listeners?
I think it's that while there's no single right style, managing yourself, your time, your ego, your priorities, that's absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
The text warns about those dangerous types. The ego-driven micromanager,
Oh.
the charismatic visionary who's totally undisciplined,
Seen those.
and the leader who just surrounds themselves with yes men. Creates an echo chamber.
Dangerous. Ultimately, the material stresses that real responsibility means setting clear, top-level goals and priorities for yourself, for the team.
And then actually enforcing them, observing them, making sure they lead to results.
Right. That's saying a fish stinks from the head.
Well, if you're the leader, you're the head now. Your self-management sets the whole tone.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so we've really drilled down on managing oneself, the dangers of ego, disorganization. Now, let's shift focus a bit to looking beyond just yourself.
Right. Broadening the perspective.
The document uses that great quote from Hillel to introduce this. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, who am I? That duality,
Wow.
what does it suggest?
It really highlights a necessary balance, doesn't it? You need self-worth, you need drive, absolutely.
Of course.
But if that's all you focus on, if it becomes purely self-centered, you risk pushing people away and ultimately limiting your own impact.
Makes sense.
And the text then draws this fascinating contrast within the context of World War II. Between many of the famous Allied generals known for big personalities, sometimes clashing egos.
Patton, Montgomery, figures like
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. And George Catlett Marshall Jr., while they were all vital, Marshall stood out. He had this remarkable lack of self-promotion, very little ego-driven behavior, even amidst all the pressure in politics.
It's easy to forget the human element in huge events like that, isn't it? The power struggles, the ambition.
Totally. But Marshall seemed to operate differently. He achieved incredible things with this quiet dedication that seemed to transcend personal ego.
So what made him different? How did he avoid that?
Well, the document brings in Pat Riley's concept, the basketball coach.
Yeah, Pat Riley.
His idea of the innocent climb. When a team first gets together, maybe before the big success, there's often this strong bond, shared purpose, everyone pulls together.
Right, the early days.
But then, as success comes, as recognition grows, Riley says that innocent climb often gets replaced by the disease of me.
The disease of me.
Okay. Individuals start focusing on their contribution, their importance, egos inflate, team bonds can fray. Have you seen that play out?
Oh, absolutely. Sports is the classic example, right? The text mentions Shaq and Kobe.
The ultimate example, maybe.
Michael Jordan's intensity, even towards teammates sometimes.
Yeah.
Or in business, you think of Enron, the greed. Or even just disgruntled execs leaking stuff out of self-interest.
Exactly. It seems that once people taste success, that temptation to focus on what's mine gets stronger.
And Marshall, he seemed immune.
Remarkably so, according to this account, even with something like rank. He insisted on the proper respect to General Marshall, but he actively pushed back against efforts to promote him further, like to Field Marshal.
Why?
Partly personal preference, he thought Field Marshal Marshall sounded silly, apparently.
Oh, right.
But also out of deep respect for his mentor, General Pershing, who never got that rank. He genuinely found honor in declining honors if it served a purpose or showed respect.
So what does that say about ego versus real confidence?
It suggests ego needs that constant external validation, the titles, the praise.
Whereas confidence...
And confidence seems deeper, rooted in self-worth, focused on the job, not who gets the spotlight.
The document also talks about how motivations can shift. Right? Early career, maybe it's about the cause, the team.
Yeah, more collective. But later, success can trigger that what's in it for me thinking. Awards, recognition become the focus. But the text is clear. We never actually earn the right to be purely selfish, to put our interests above the mission or the team.
And Marshall faced the ultimate test of this, didn't he? D-Day command.
The biggest command, arguably, of the century. Guaranteed history book stuff.
And Roosevelt offered it to him.
Yes. But Marshall's response was incredible. He basically said, "The decision is yours, Mr. President. My wishes have nothing to do with the matter." He genuinely felt Eisenhower was the better choice for that specific role.
That level of selflessness.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to comprehend in that context.
It really is. It shows how ego can stop us contributing to something bigger. Like Cheryl Strayed said, you're becoming who you're going to be, and so you might as well not be an asshole.
Haha, blunt but true. Success shouldn't corrupt your character.
Exactly. And there's another story, right? About a general who treated Marshall badly early on.
Yes. Later, Marshall was in a position to get revenge, basically.
But he didn't. He saw the man still had value, that the country's needs came first. The text calls it magnanimity.
Magnanimity. Great word. President Truman even said that what set Marshall apart was that never did General Marshall think about himself.
Incredible. And that ties into the story about his portrait, right? Refusing to even look at the finished painting.
Yeah, it just shows that focus on substance over image, which isn't to say image is unimportant, especially early on.
No, not at all. But it can become a major distraction from the actual work that matters. Marshall's wife said his modesty wasn't superficial. It came from genuinely tempering ego with humility and selflessness.
So for someone listening, striving for success, what's the takeaway?
It's finding that balance, I think. Wanting recognition is human, it's natural. But it shouldn't be the only driver, or even the main one. Remember that soccer coach, Tony Adams?
Play for the name on the front of the jersey.
And they'll remember the name on the back.
Right.
Focus on the contribution, the team, the mission.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the text argues Marshall's selflessness, his integrity. These weren't weaknesses. They were central to his huge, lasting impact, even if he's not a household name like some others. His attitude was basically, the credit, who cares?
Right. So wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
some really key ideas stand out. First, that absolute need for self-management. It's foundational.
Can't build anything lasting without it.
Then the DeLorean story, such a stark warning about unchecked ego and the chaos it breeds.
It's a cautionary tale for sure.
And then the power of looking beyond yourself, shown by Eisenhower's structure and especially Marshall's incredible selflessness.
That focus on something larger.
And for everyone listening, hopefully this gives you food for thought. Take a moment, reflect on your own approach, your work, ambitions, how you interact in teams.
Are you building sustainably through organization, humility, or is that disease of me maybe a risk down the line? It's worth asking. It really is.
Yeah.
That's the essential question, maybe.
Yeah.
As you chase your goals, who are you becoming in the process? Is your legacy going to be about personal trophies or the positive impact you make through good management and a focus beyond just yourself?
That balance between ambition and contribution, something to keep thinking about.